Becoming a Transformative Educator by Emily Simpson, August 2015. What does my ideal classroom look, sound, and feel like? This is something that I've thought a lot about over the course of the past few months, especially when considering the word transformative and what that really means in practice. So let's take a look at this handy Y chart and see what we can get at. If I'm being honest, my ideal classroom looks diverse in every sense of the word. I think that direct personal experience and interaction among students from different backgrounds and between myself and those students is the first step towards a transformative environment. That kind of exposure and cross-cultural communication, as Geneva Gay described in her 2002 article, represents a significant facet of culturally responsive teaching. I also want my classroom to appear engaging, even before students are introduced to the content. I had an English teacher in high school who set her classroom up like this, in two groupings of desks that faced each other. As a student, I enjoyed it, and as a future teacher, I can see the value in not necessarily orienting myself at the head of the classroom, but instead engaging with the students as they engage with one another. This arrangement of desks also lends itself to easy transitions into small groups for group work and small discussions. I want my classroom to look like this a good chunk of the time, especially for history, a subject that is quite frankly open to lots of interpretation. I want to develop discussion skills in my students, allow them to engage with one another respectfully and frequently, and to develop agency in doing so without my constantly guiding the conversation. And then, of course, there is also the potential to circle up for those more difficult conversations that I do intend to have in my classroom. I feel that the more open the room looks, the more open everyone will feel to engage with one another and with their own discomfort. Now we can delve into some content discussion. If possible, I would like to have a few billboards in my classroom for student-curated content displays. I want my students to engage with the material in ways that will help them contextualize the course content and internalize some of the dates and orders of events without mere rote memorization. We've been reading selections from Daniel Willingham's Why Don't Kids Like School in Dr. Kretz's class, and the one thing that has stuck with me above all others is this idea that memory is the residue of thought. If, by creating these very visible timelines or maps in the public space of their classroom, my students think about the material enough that the residue allows them to construct them internally as well, I think that will be successful and transformative far beyond my giving them a list of people, dates, and locations to memorize and regurgitate. I think how my desk and my area look matters too. If my students see that I am constantly engaging in the material as well and doing my job, following my passion, they will hopefully buy what I'm trying to sell a little bit more. And this could be a bit of a stretch, but if we are discussing my ideal classroom, I want it to look welcoming and well used. I would love to have a record player with an aux hookup to be able to share era-appropriate music before or after class or during individual work time. If I could figure out a way to manage its use without too much disruption, I would also love to bring in a couch, something with a bright, obnoxious floral or plaid pattern. So I've mentioned that I want my classroom to sound a bit musical, but what else do I want to hear in this transformative space? Collaboration is my number one goal. I want to curate a classroom environment that encourages my students to work with one another to discuss absolutely everything they possibly can. I also want to make sure that my students feel comfortable doing so with me. I want my students to know that they can come to me with an idea, an opinion, or a suggestion, and I will treat them with complete open-mindedness and respect. I also want my classroom to sound inclusive. I mentioned culturally responsive teaching earlier in regard to cross-cultural communication in a diverse environment, but I also want to really work on developing relationships with student families during the school year as well. My classroom, if it is to be transformative at all, should be a hive of inquisition. I want my students to ask every question they possibly could have and get in the habit of forming those questions in the first place. This is such an important aspect of engaging with historical content, especially if I want to develop critical thinkers and critical theorists who question the status quo. Questions also drive knowledge construction, and in a student-centered classroom such as mine, I intend to capitalize on that. Last but not least, my classroom will sound affirming. I want my students to develop that academic mindset that they really do belong in this educational environment. I want to be sure to notice something positive in each and every one of them, and to let them know that I've noticed. So what does this classroom feel like? Above all, it is going to feel challenging, but not impossible. Part of culturally responsive teaching is maintaining those high expectations for every student and holding them accountable. But to do so without providing the proper scaffolding and support for each student along the way would be to do them a complete disservice. As we've read in Lamotte's Teach Like a Champion, we want to push our students, not allow them to completely opt out, but also give them the right string of reaching questions to challenge them without letting them get too frustrated and give up entirely. That being said, I also believe it is important, and Nell agrees with me here, to make sure that students feel like this work has value for them beyond the classroom. After all of the work and reading we've done with the non-cognitive factors, I do believe in the importance of developing them in my classroom. I've highlighted academic mindsets explicitly, but I believe that my emphasis on collaborative group work and my consistently high expectations for participation and engagement will touch on many of the rest of them. But how will I develop social-emotional learning competencies such as self-awareness in a history classroom? I have an idea for my personal history project where students will keep an online, physical, or photo diary, or some combination of the three, throughout the year in whatever way feels most comfortable to them, including or excluding events and feelings as they see fit. At some point near the end, they will treat those diaries as their own primary sources to analyze. Hopefully this will help integrate some historical content and skills into the development of their own feelings and behaviors. If we change this project to the history of my neighborhood, we begin to move more towards social awareness. I would also like to develop self-management in my students by allowing them the opportunity to let me and others know when they are not in a good mental or emotional place to participate positively in the classroom without fear of punishment or of being ostracized. More than anything, I want to be a positive adult relationship in my students' lives. So, what about trauma? We've covered it a lot in this class, for which I'm grateful. I think that being more aware of my students and addressing their social-emotional learning competencies and growth areas will help me keep an eye on potential traumas that they are experiencing. Kendra's guest lecture on our locus of control really struck a chord with me. Because, of course, addressing trauma and supporting my students starts with me. What can I do and what will I do? In my classroom, I will endeavor to create and maintain a safe environment and culture of support. I will try to be aware of any potentially sensitive topics, pay attention to verbal and nonverbal cues from students when I touch on one of those topics inadvertently, provide support, and give advance warnings for triggering materials. I will be a constant source of positive influence in my students' lives. And most importantly, if and when they speak about their trauma, I will actually listen. And I will listen without judgment or assumptions. Beyond my own classroom, I intend to work within my sphere of influence as often as my students need me to. Hopefully I will have access to and develop a working relationship with a school social worker or counselor, so that when my students have issues beyond my abilities, I can refer them to that additional resource. Beyond that, I will work with my colleagues and mentors and ask them for advice or help when needed. I did this at Scarlett with Joshua and with you, and it proved to be really valuable for everyone involved. And then, of course, it will be important to recognize those times when situations are completely beyond my locus of control or sphere of influence. That is part of self-care in its own way. And if I can't take care of myself, I certainly won't be able to take care of others in a transformative or beneficial way. Again, the goal here is to be transformative for all students. Curriculum plays a huge role here for me. I believe that teaching history only as the privileged and oppressor groups of society have written it does not empower any student, but it particularly silences the voices of students from outside those groups. White, Western-centric history courses do nothing but perpetuate those systems of power. Culturally responsive teaching is not only providing oppressed groups with the tools and knowledge necessary to challenge the status quo, it is also illuminating those systems of oppression for those in positions of privilege and helping them to acknowledge their own place in society. Part of my job as a transformative educator is also to bring social justice issues into the classroom, connections to current events. But it doesn't stop there. When I worked back in Philly, I saw firsthand the effects of zero-tolerance policies in schools. My students, already dealing with overcrowding from 1/3 of the public school district being shut down, faced expulsion and arrest at a significantly higher rate than their more privileged counterparts in the suburbs or the private school system. All of this in Pennsylvania, a state which in 2011 added $871 million to its prisons budget and cut $961 million from its education budget. So what can I do? I can bring restorative practices into my own classroom and attempt to integrate them into whichever school and district I end up in. I can push back against zero-tolerance policies by attempting to solve problems inside the walls of my own classroom instead of relegating students to the administration to be suspended or expelled. I can advocate publicly in protests and privately by following relevant legislation and keeping in touch with my representatives. All in all, there is a lot to think about in becoming a transformative educator, especially after everything we have taken in this summer. I have plenty of ideas of how I want to apply these theories in my practice and who I want to be as an educator, but I know there will be plenty of speed bumps along the way. Every time it seems too daunting, or too impossible, or too bleak, I think back on my experiences at Scarlet working with these incredible kids, and I can instantly feel that it is worth it. Every tear, every sigh of frustration, every hopeless moment is totally eclipsed by the students we are here to help.